Yesterday, we started talking about Missouri, and you watched a short video and then also explored a website to learn even more about Missouri. So today I'm going to review a couple of those things and we're going to talk a little bit more about the state of Missouri in which we live. So first of all, let's talk through some major cities that are in Missouri. And the first major one to know about is Jefferson City. It's right in the middle of our state, and it is our capital city. It's where the Capitol building is and where all of the politicians meet in order to make laws for our state. The next one, the one you're probably most familiar with, is St. Charles. That's the city that we live in. Did you know that St. Charles was the first state capital? And there was a state capitol building located there down by Main Street. Another city that you may be familiar with is St. Louis. This is really close to St. Charles, and it's home of the Gateway Arch. It's also the home of the Blues and the Cardinals. And the last city we're going to talk about is on the other side of the state, and this is Kansas City. It borders right up against where Missouri and the state of Kansas meet. So Kansas City is known as the City of Fountains, and it's the home of the Royals and the Chiefs, the baseball team and the football team. So next, let's look at some of the Missouri rivers. It's the Mississippi River, and in our picture, it's highlighted in this green color. So down here are facts about the Mississippi River is it forms the eastern border of Missouri. It's the border that separates Missouri from Illinois, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And St. Louis is a major port on the Mississippi River. Next, let's look at the Missouri River. This is the one that's outlined in blue going across the state. You'll see it even goes through Jefferson City, and then it meets up with the Mississippi River in St. Louis. So the Missouri River flows from Montana, where it joins the Mississippi River near St. Louis. It is nicknamed the Big Muddy because it is so dark and murky from picking up all the dirt and silts along its journey. The Missouri River splits the state into two parts, and it flows across the middle of Missouri. Down at the bottom, we have some fun facts. It says the Missouri River and the Mississippi River are nearly the same length. So the Missouri River is 2,341 miles long, and the Mississippi River is 2,320 miles long. So the Missouri River is just a little bit longer. So here are some different landscapes that can be found in Missouri. There's forests, which cover about 1/3 of Missouri. Different trees that you might see, maybe even outside your door, are oak trees and elm trees, hickory trees, walnut, maple, and cottonwoods. Another landscape found in Missouri are plains and prairies. This is where a lot of the times you'll find rabbits or deer and foxes and squirrels and raccoons. A lot of times there's tall grasses and maybe some flowers and stuff like that in the plains. Next, you can also find lakes. Some of the big lakes in Missouri include the Lake of the Ozarks, and there's also the Harry S. Truman Reservoir. Both of these are really popular for travel and vacations. Another landscape that's found in Missouri are the hills and mountains. Now, these mountains aren't going to be quite like the big Rocky Mountains or things like those, but they are still smaller mountains. The Tom Sauk Mountain is the state's highest point. Another landscape that you'll find in Missouri is the rivers. Just like the Missouri and the Mississippi River we just talked about, those are two of the biggest, but there's also a lot of smaller rivers, and they're filled with all sorts of different fish. And then one of the most popular landscapes that Missouri is known for is caves. Not all states have caves like we do. We have more than 5,000 caves in Missouri. So next we're going to talk about life in Missouri. And there's urban life and rural life. So about 70% of Missourians, the people that live in Missouri, live in these urban or suburban areas. And what it means by urban and suburban is it's close to cities and where people live. So in these areas, there's a lot of stores and schools, churches, healthcare like hospitals. Your neighbors are pretty close by. There's trains and buses and different forms of transportation to get different places. A lot of times the urban areas are a little bit more crowded, maybe a little bit louder, but there's also a lot of activities close by. So think about all like the sporting fields and stuff like that, or the restaurants and things to do. So if 70% of the people live in urban areas, that means about 30% of people live in rural areas. And this is kind of like out in the country. This area is a lot more quiet. There's a lot of open spaces, and there aren't as many people in these areas. The neighbors might be a lot farther away. All of the stores and schools and churches and hospitals are also really far away. A lot of times in these rural areas, that's where the farmland is. So there's a lot of farmers and things like that. All right, that is it for our learning on Missouri today. Tomorrow, you are going to do an assignment that has to do with your city, your state, and your country. So if you need to review that for tomorrow, you can go back and look through these. Remember, your city is St. Charles. Your state, remember, is the state of Missouri. And then your country is the United States. So don't forget that for our assignment for tomorrow.